go. I'm an expert, I promise. All right, first nail in. That's the hardest part. Look at that. In this chapter, we're talking all about art and wall decor. So we'll hit 3 main points. We'll talk about the different options for hanging art. Then I'll move into the different kinds of art, photographs, paintings, mementos. And then finally, we'll work through a gallery wall that I'm gonna build here in our dining room. When you walk into a space and you think about what hits your eye level first, it's the walls and all of the things hanging on them. So it really makes a big statement. It creates a lot of impact in a space. You might not think that you need art in your room. After all, maybe you've got the table, you've got the chairs, you can sit and eat, like that's enough, right? You would be surprised what a difference it makes when you start putting art up on your walls. All of a sudden it goes from a room that could be anyone's room to your room, reflecting your personal stories, your memories, your relationships, and the things that you love. I challenge you to think about art and add it to your space. It will really transform the way your dining room comes together. So there are a few different ways to approach hanging art. There's the more dramatic singular piece on its own. It's maybe oversized. You can also stack a few different pieces next to each other that are matching in frame or size, maybe a couple on top of each other. And then there's also the option to do a collection of pieces of varying sizes, grouped in a way that feels organic, and that would be called a gallery wall. That's actually what I'm gonna do here in our dining room. I have a slew of options, things that I've collected and have personal attachment to, and I'll be working them across this wall, spanning the whole back wall and crossing the door to the kitchen. I really think art can be anything as long as it has some sort of significance, it is visually attractive to you, and tells some kind of story. It's meaningful. In our case, I've collected a handful of things, and every single one of them hits one of those marks. It's either beautiful and I love it for that reason alone, or it is connected to our story. It has some sort of sentimental value to me, some kind of significance and purpose for living in our room. So once you've evaluated your room and where the opportunities are for art in your space, these are a few options for types of art. I have here a handful of things that are special to me. Art can be something very traditional that is painted or drawn like this. This is some of my dad's art. I feel tremendously lucky to have a father that was an artist. And of course, these are things that I treasure. They really mean so much to me. But this doesn't have to be a family member's art. Maybe it's just something that you saw at a thrift store and you really loved, or an antique mall, and it's visually pleasing to you, and that's enough. So drawn art, painted art, illustrations, that is one type of artwork that you can consider. Of course, there's also photography. So many beautiful examples of photography that I really love. This is one taken by a friend. I purchased it from her. She's a local photographer, and I really like having that connection with the person that created this piece of artwork. Speaking of personal sentiment, this is another way to source great art. Your children's art, or your family member's art, a friend's art that is youthful. It's something that is easy and organic. I love using my children's art throughout our house. This is my son's from maybe his first year of life, and it actually looks so fun and joyful to me, and it makes me think of him. So it can really be as simple as that. Really anything that has personal significance, I would say, can become art. Here's another example, and this is specific to our home, our story, but I wonder if you have some similar thing in your story that you could put in a frame and make into art. This is wallpaper from our house when we were in the process of renovating it. We pulled some of these scraps of wallpaper that I believe were a part of the original build in the 1920s, and we saved it. And I decided, you know what? This would be really cool to frame. it tells the story of this actual structure. It reminds us of our experience renovating this house. This is very specific, but the point is that art can be something that is a remnant of an experience, something you've picked up from travel, something you've been gifted. It does not have to be a piece of two-dimensional paper with something drawn on it that was intended to be art. Now, outside of the category of art, there is, of course, just decor. Things that are decorative. As long as it's something you really love, I think you should go for it. So the main point in all of this is that art can be approachable. It's personal, it's subjective. I encourage you to find things that you really love. This is where your design direction comes into play. Look back at some of those early inspiration images and pay attention to the kinds of art in those rooms. Those early ideas will inform you in this step of the design process. So far I've been speaking of art pretty generally, but now I want to get specific to this gallery wall in our dining room. Putting together a gallery wall, it starts with a curation of art pieces. You're picking and choosing strategically so that when everything goes up on the wall, it looks like it belongs together. What I know is that I want art that falls into mostly a neutral color palette. So that's blacks and ivories and grays. I also have selected several gold frames. Actually, most of these frames are some sort of brass gold color. And then a couple black frames. That just feels like a basic. A black frame is classic, it's basic, it works in any room. And I added for fun one shiny chrome frame. And this is just a surprise. It's like one thing that catches your eye that's a little bit different. I think that's important really in any design consideration as you're putting things together. Yes, have a framework for what you want, but don't be afraid to leave some space for something that's a bit outside of that box. You could absolutely do a whole gallery wall with just clean, simple frames. Maybe they're all black frames and just really thin. Or maybe you go for a really thick whitewashed wood, and that's for everything. There are a lot of ways to do this, so I think just knowing what is your design direction from early on. Do you want a more edited look, something a little simple? Do you want your art to really be the forefront and the focus of the room so that you can go wild and bring in all sorts of variety? That's up to you, and it will be informed by your design direction. But in our case, in this dining space, I know that this art will make a statement, but I don't want it to be overwhelming because we already have a lot going on in this room. So for our gallery wall, what I'm using to connect the pieces in this collection is the color palette of the art, but what I'm using to make it different and interesting so that it's not monotonous when it's all hung up is different sizes of art, so small, medium, and large, and then types of art. We've got some drawn things, we've got some abstract things, mementos, photographs. So I think art feels best when it's hung near and around furniture versus off in its own universe. So I'm going to place the chair that I know will probably live in that corner a good bit of the time, and then we'll start to build the gallery wall around that. Okay, so now it's time to actually pull things down and start plotting out arrangement. I want to start with my largest piece. It just feels like a good base to then build on top of. So this is the one. Way up here, this feels like that's not connected to the furniture at all. Bringing it just a bit lower, now all of a sudden it feels like these things are considered together. By building this out on the floor first, it means I can work through the composition without nailing up on the wall. If I was nailing right now, I'd have 100 holes in this wall. You know, I think that's too much of the same. We've got abstract art that's very textural, abstract art that's very textural. So not enough visual difference there. I'd like to swap this. It's a good contrast to that piece. I actually really love this shoe, and it's next to something abstract. So they feel similar and also different. When building a gallery wall that takes an organic shape, It's really easy for things to look disorganized or chaotic. So one of the ways that I like to keep things tidy and organized is by lining up edges of frames. Let's add another piece. I would like to add a mirror. Another thing that's helpful in organizing a gallery wall is to maintain similar spacing between your various pieces of art. I don't typically pull out a tape measure because sometimes the depth of a frame can actually distort the appearance of spacing. So just use your eye. Okay, so now that I've plotted out things on the floor, it's actually time to start nailing into the walls, which makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm gonna trust what I've done here on the floor. I'll take a picture of it with my phone just so I can reference back to the master overall composition, and then I can piece by piece hang things on the wall. All right, first nail in. That's the hardest part. Ah, look at that. Shiplap walls under there. Yep. There we go. I've got these last few pieces here on the table that I'd like to put up on the left side of the door, and I'm gonna think about this as a continuation of the right side, but it will be its own cluster. So now I've finished my gallery wall. That is no small feat. And if you're following along with me, you're probably feeling a sense of accomplishment too. Adding art to your space really personalizes it. So I hope you've learned a few things along the way and are inspired to add art to your dining room.